All right, so looking at the conversation since yesterday, what do you make of them? Does it seem to you like maybe there is a disconnect between what the everyday Nigerian is experiencing and what the leaders are saying? Looking at, some of the figures they were reading out yesterday, but your own, your own CEO said something that, we need more transparency from the government. We need the government to also begin to show us that they're also tightening their belts, even as they tell Nigerians to tighten their belts. It seems that the government is missing that point. What do you make of yesterday's conversations?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it was an interesting conversation, especially when you look at the different perspectives. So there are those that believe that, from the presidency side, that they're trying to do things well. They're trying to manage the economy much better. There are the views of those on the private sector side that feel like a lot more can still be done. And when you talk about Nigeria's economy from a broad macro perspective, we're still talking about growth rate at 3%. We're talking about inflation at 32%. Exchange rate still around 1,650 and thereabout. And these are critical issues that affect the lives of the everyday Nigerian. And I think what I see from the discussion is there was a lot of admittance to the fact that things are not going well with Nigeria.
Admittance from where? From the government? Because I don't think I heard that. We only heard, oh, we empathize with you, but that was all. They kept reeling out things, talking about, the GDP growing from 2.9 to 3 point something. That's not what we're talking about, is it?
Yes, so the admittance was from, if you listen to the chairman's speech, right, he clearly stated that this is where we are as a country. We have no business, being at having growth rate of 3% as giving Nigeria's huge potential. Inflation is pushing many people, into poverty. So if you listen to the panel before the one before the World Bank, the vice president of the World Bank, some of the panelists reeled out certain things that, look, government is asking us to cut costs, inflation and all that, subsidy removal affecting people's income. But then we'll still see the government spending as if everything is fine. We're talking about cost of governance, we're talking about efficiency of spending, which I think it's something we've not really done well and we need to do well. So the admittance was on some of the panelists and even the chairman's speech. But then, of course, what do you expect? Government will always say they're trying, but from my own perspective, I think they can do a lot more better to impact the lives of the average Nigerians positively.
All right, there is another one, another thing yesterday. That was the statement from the senior vice president of World Bank saying we would need to stay 10 to 15 years on the course for us to see changes. What do you make of that as an economist?
What I see with Nigeria, I think 10 to 15 years of high inflation, 10 to 15 years of rising unemployment. I'm not sure. I think perhaps he's speaking from a reforms perspective to say that, some of these reforms that have been made in terms of stabilizing exchange rates in a way, and perhaps also trying to see how they can remove subsidies so that we can have a fair market system. I think probably that's where he's coming from. But looking at all of the macro indicators, to be honest, I think we need to move faster. We need to also have in mind that as much as we are looking out for foreign investment into Nigeria, we should not cripple what we have locally. Right now, interest rates are around over 30% or thereabout. I don't think we can grow or develop or move to the next stage of development with that kind of interest rates. It's not happening. How do businesses get funding at 30%? What are you selling? We're talking about how inflation itself is not just a problem for the masses like we always hear. Even for businesses, real returns right now are negative. If you invest, 1 year investment, you're getting something around 23% or thereabout. Inflation is 32%, so it's still below inflation. And my problem here, usually with all of the prescriptions we've seen, is that we target so much about raising interest rates to catch up with inflation. But the real problem should be, or the real solution should be that get that inflation down so that real interest rate can be positive. And so that means looking at all of the structural bottlenecks, and it was clearly, discussed yesterday, all of the issues affecting agricultural productivity, all of the issues affecting access to credit for small, micro, and medium-sized businesses, all of the issues of insecurity that people need to farm and be able to produce goods. How do we attract, mechanization into agriculture so that we can raise productivity of the sector? Right now, many of our goods are still being lost, and we're talking about, post-harvest losses that are huge across different, crops, and those are critical issues that I think we need to focus on rather than interest rate trying to catch up with inflation. If inflation keeps going to 50%, are we going to raise rate to 50%? So I think the focus should be more on bringing down inflation, and to a reasonable level. And there's a point I think I need to make, perhaps before you ask your next question, that when inflation rate declines, it doesn't mean prices have dropped. So it just means that the rate of increase in price has slowed. So it increased by perhaps 32% last month. The month before it was 33%, but there's still an increase. So I think bringing it down significantly, it's not a matter of using just interest rate. It has to be a collaborative effort between fiscal and monetary policies. And more importantly, and even interestingly, that's the theme of the summit: collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness.
Well, that's quite interesting. I like how you brought me to the fiscal authority, because they've been doing a lot of things on their own part, whether it is the economic stabilization bills, which of course stems from the ASAP recommendations, or even, some other things, whether it's the withholding tax, the new withholding tax regime, or the modification of VAT. So talk to me. Do you think these things will also help in, crashing the bad or uninteresting, unfavorable macroeconomic numbers?
Well, I think they will have some impact. The impact, of course, we may not be too clear on that, but I think the goal of these bills, the economic stabilization bill, part of it is to bring, ease to businesses. So it's almost like an ease of doing business bill in a way, focusing more on the tax angle. And I think Mr. Taiwo Oyedele has, done some tremendous work in the last 1 year plus that he's been at the helm of affairs of the tax system. But what I say also is that for this,
in less than 30 seconds, so we can end this.
Yeah, for the small, medium-sized businesses, there are still issues of multiple taxes. They still pay lots of numerous taxes. So when you leave Abuja and leave the Transcorp and you go to these businesses, you see that they have different taxes from local government, from non-state actors, and all of those. I think that's where the reform should go to see how you can ease the business, ease doing business for those small, medium-sized entrepreneurs.
All right, thank you so much, Wilson.